The suitcase lay open on the bed like a wound, clothes spilling from it in disarray. Olivia Reed stood frozen in the center of the bedroom she'd shared with her husband for 7 years, clutching his navy blue tie, the one she'd given him for their anniversary. The same tie she'd seen lipstick smudged on 3 days ago. "So this is what it comes to," she whispered, dropping the tie into the suitcase. 7 years reduced to a weekender bag and whatever I can carry. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Megan, her best friend. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" Olivia's thumbs hovered over the screen. Before she could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her stomach drop. She wasn't supposed to be home. Garrett thought she was at her sister's until tomorrow. That's why she'd come back early, to pack her things in peace. But now his footsteps were on the porch. Then voices, Garrett's deep timbre and a woman's higher pitch. A laugh. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribcage as she silently closed the bedroom door, leaving just enough space to hear. She wasn't ready for a confrontation, not yet. Not until she understood everything. "You can't keep doing this, Garrett," the woman said, her voice carrying easily through the quiet house. "She deserves to know the truth." 3 months earlier, Olivia had believed her life was exactly as it should be. She and Garrett had moved to the suburbs of Boston 2 years ago, trading their cramped apartment for a modest colonial with a backyard large enough for the children they planned to have. Garrett's architecture firm was thriving, and Olivia had recently been promoted to creative director at the advertising agency where she'd worked since college. They were the couple others envied, successful, attractive, seemingly in sync. When they hosted dinner parties, Garrett would catch Olivia's eye across the room and give her that private smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. At night, they'd debrief about their days, limbs tangled together under the covers, planning vacations and renovations and someday babies. The first crack appeared so subtly that Olivia almost missed it. Garrett began working later, his texts becoming shorter, more perfunctory. "Don't wait up." Meeting running long. Grabbing dinner with clients. Then came the weekend conference in New York that mysteriously couldn't be found on his firm's website. The credit card charge for a restaurant they'd never visited together. The way he'd begun password protecting his phone. But it was the perfume that finally broke through her denial. A scent that wasn't hers, lingering on his collar when he returned from a late meeting. Floral with hints of sandalwood. Expensive. Deliberate. That night, while Garrett showered, Olivia did something she'd never thought herself capable of. She checked his phone. The password, their anniversary date, unlocked a series of text messages from someone saved simply as D. They were discussing meeting times, hotel preferences, and in one message that burned itself into her memory. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Olivia had placed the phone back exactly as she'd found it, then spent the night staring at the ceiling, tears silently tracking down her temples into her hair. For the next 2 weeks, she'd watched her husband like he was a stranger, noting the small lies and inconsistencies that had been there all along. She'd called his office once, only to be told he'd left early that day, the same day he'd texted her he'd be working late. Yesterday, she'd finally gathered the courage to follow him. She'd watched from her car as he'd met a tall woman with cascading dark hair outside an upscale hotel. The woman had straightened Garrett's tie, Olivia's tie, before they'd walked inside together, his hand resting intimately at the small of her back. In that moment, the last thread of hope had snapped. Olivia had driven to her sister Rachel's apartment and spent the night sobbing on her couch, plans forming through the tears. Today, while Garrett was supposedly at a client meeting in Providence, she would pack her essential belongings and leave. The confrontation could come later, after she'd found solid ground beneath her feet again. Except now, inexplicably, Garrett was home. With her? "I think she suspects something," Garrett was saying now, his voice drifting up the staircase. "She's been distant, checking my phone when she thinks I'm not looking." The woman sighed audibly. "Of course she suspects something. You're not exactly subtle, Garrett. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Olivia inched closer to the door, her heart pounding so loudly she feared they might hear it downstairs. Who was this woman who seemed to be scolding her husband about the affair? I don't know what to do, Garrett replied, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. This whole situation is so much more complicated than I ever imagined it would be. Well, you should have thought about that before you started this mess, the woman responded sharply. Diana's pregnancy changes everything. Olivia's knees buckled. She grabbed the door frame to steady herself, a strangled gasp escaping her lips before she could stop it. Diana, pregnant. The conversation downstairs abruptly stopped. Olivia? Garrett called out. Is that you? She couldn't move, couldn't respond. The room seemed to spin around her as footsteps pounded up the stairs. Garrett appeared in the doorway, his face draining of color when he saw the open suitcase on the bed. Behind him stood a woman Olivia had never seen before, tall and elegant with that cascade of dark hair, just as she'd witnessed yesterday. But she wasn't what Olivia had expected. This woman was older, perhaps in her late 50s, with streaks of silver in her hair and familiar eyes that were now regarding Olivia with what appeared to be sympathy, Liv? Garrett began, his voice cracking. This isn't— Don't you dare say it's not what I think, Olivia cut him off, finding her voice at last. I saw you yesterday, Garrett. At the Westbrook Hotel. With her— She pointed at the woman who was now shaking her head slowly. Oh, honey, the woman said gently. I'm Diana's mother, Eleanor. I'm not the one having an affair with your husband. The floor seemed to drop away beneath Olivia's feet. Diana's mother? She repeated numbly. Yes, Eleanor said. And I've been trying to convince this idiot to come clean with you before things get even more complicated. Garrett leaned against the wall, looking utterly defeated. I was going to tell you tonight, Liv, I swear. I've been trying to find the right way to say it for weeks. Say what exactly? Olivia demanded, anger surging through her confusion. That you've been cheating on me? That your mistress is pregnant? What part of this were you struggling to articulate, Garrett? All of it, he whispered. The affair, yes. But also, Diana works at my firm. She's my business partner's daughter. Martin's daughter? Olivia sat heavily on the edge of the bed, next to her half-packed suitcase. Martin Hayes had been Garrett's mentor, the senior partner who'd taken Garrett under his wing straight out of graduate school. He was also one of the most powerful developers in Boston. Eleanor stepped fully into the room. Martin doesn't know yet about the affair or the pregnancy. Diana's been afraid to tell him. So you came here to— What? Olivia looked between Eleanor and her husband, trying to make sense of their presence. I came to knock some sense into Garrett, Eleanor said firmly. Diana told me everything last week. She's been a mess, Olivia. She thought Garrett had told you they were seeing each other, that you two were separating. When she found out he'd been lying to both of you, she shook her head. I've known Martin for 30 years. This will destroy him, personally and professionally. And I care about my daughter's future, even if she's made some terrible choices. Garrett slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. Martin's planning to retire next year. He wants to name me as his successor. If he finds out about Diana— And suddenly, with perfect clarity, Olivia understood. It wasn't just an affair. It was Garrett's entire career, his ambitions, everything he'd worked for hanging in the balance. The man she'd married had always been driven by success above all else. Now she realized he'd been willing to sacrifice their marriage to protect that success. You weren't planning to leave me at all, were you? Olivia asked quietly. You were going to keep lying to me, to Diana, to Martin, to everyone, until you secured your position. Then what? Divorce me quietly later? Garrett looked up, his expression confirming her suspicion before he even spoke. I was going to fix this, Liv. I just needed time to figure out how to minimize the damage. Minimize the damage, Olivia repeated, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. To your career, you mean? Not to our marriage. Not to me. To everyone involved, he insisted. You have to understand— I understand perfectly, Olivia interrupted. I understand that you've been lying to me for months. I understand that you got your boss's daughter pregnant. And I understand that your primary concern right now is how this affects your promotion prospects. She turned to Eleanor. Does Diana know you're here? Eleanor shook her head. No, she'd be furious if she knew. But someone needed to force this situation into the open. Well, Olivia said, rising to her feet with a strange sense of calm washing over her. Congratulations. It's in the open now. The three of them migrated downstairs to the living room, an awkward procession of betrayals and revelations. Olivia felt strangely detached, as if she were watching the scene unfold from a distance. This morning, she'd been a wife planning to leave her cheating husband. Now she was, what? A soon-to-be ex-wife negotiating the terms of a public implosion? How far along is she? Olivia asked, breaking the tense silence. 14 weeks, Garrett replied, staring at his hands. She told me about a month ago. A month. 4 weeks of lying beside her at night, knowing he was going to be a father to another woman's child. 4 weeks of late meetings that were probably panicked conversations with Diana about their future. 4 weeks of Olivia still trying to salvage their marriage while he'd already mentally abandoned it. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? She asked. Or was I supposed to find out when you suddenly announced you were leaving me for your pregnant girlfriend? Garrett winced. It wasn't like that, Liv. I was trying to figure out what to do. Diana wants to keep the baby, but she's willing to let me decide how involved I'll be. How generous of her, Olivia said coldly. Eleanor cleared her throat. Diana made her own choices, but she's not the villain here. She truly believed your marriage was over. Because that's what he told her, Olivia concluded, looking at Eleanor. Well, he was telling me everything was fine. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. Diana showed me the texts where Garrett told her you two were separating, that it was just a matter of timing and logistics. Olivia turned to Garrett, the last pieces clicking into place. Is that why you suggested I take that 3-month assignment in Chicago? You were trying to get me out of the way while you figured this out? The project had seemed like a godsend when it was offered last week, a chance to rebrand a major client, with a substantial bonus that could have become her financial cushion after leaving Garrett. She'd been tempted, but had ultimately declined, unwilling to put off the confrontation about his affair. Garrett had the decency to look ashamed. I thought it would give everyone some breathing room. You'd be advancing your career while I sorted things out here. While you decided whether to stay with your wife or the mother of your child, Olivia translated. How thoughtful of you to help me advance my career while you were deciding whether to destroy my life. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. There's something else you should know, Olivia. Martin is announcing his retirement at the firm's anniversary gala next month. He's planning to name Garrett as his successor that night. And let me guess, Olivia said, the pieces fitting together with devastating clarity. Diana would be showing by then, wouldn't she? Eleanor nodded. She's already started wearing looser clothes to the office. Olivia laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. So that was your timeline. You needed me gone by the gala. It wasn't like that, Garrett protested weakly. Then tell me what it was like, Olivia demanded, her voice rising. Tell me exactly what your plan was, Garrett. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were willing to sacrifice everyone, me, Diana, even Martin, to protect your precious career. Garrett stood suddenly, pacing the living room. You think I wanted any of this? You think I planned to fall for Martin's daughter, to get her pregnant? Everything I've worked for is hanging by a thread, Olivia. Everything! And what about everything I've worked for? Olivia shot back. 7 years of marriage. The life we built together. The children we talked about having. Did you think about any of that while you were sleeping with Diana? Of course I did. Garrett shouted. Why do you think this has been eating me alive? I know I've hurt you. I know I've made a mess of everything. But what was I supposed to do? Tell Martin I got his daughter pregnant and destroy both our careers. Tell you and watch our marriage implode? Tell Diana to get an abortion? You were supposed to be honest, Olivia shouted back, tears streaming down her face now. With me, with Diana, with yourself. Instead, you've been manipulating all of us. trying to control the situation to minimize the damage to yourself. He did consider coming clean, Eleanor interjected quietly. That's why I'm here. Diana told me Garrett was finally talking about telling you this weekend. How noble of him, Olivia said bitterly. After months of lying, after getting another woman pregnant, he was finally going to do the bare minimum of human decency and tell his wife the truth. I know I've been a coward, Garrett admitted, his voice breaking. I kept hoping there was a way out that wouldn't hurt everyone involved. There isn't, Olivia said simply. You made sure of that the moment you decided to cheat. She walked to the window, looking out at the yard where they'd once talked about building a swing set for their future children. Now Garrett would have a child, but not with her. He would build that swing set at another house, push another woman's child while Olivia, started over at 35? I need to ask you something, she said, turning back to face her husband. And I need the truth. No more lies, Garrett. Not today. He nodded, his expression resigned. Do you love her, Diana? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 7 years of history and the weight of what came next. Garrett closed his eyes briefly before meeting her gaze. Yes, he said quietly. I didn't mean for it to happen, but yes. The truth shouldn't have hurt more than the betrayal that preceded it, but somehow it did. Olivia felt something final break inside her chest. Then why are you still here? She asked. Why haven't you already left me for her? Because it's complicated, he started. No, Olivia cut him off. It's actually very simple. You stayed because you were trying to have it all. The devoted wife, the pregnant girlfriend, and the prestigious promotion. You thought you could manage all of us until it was convenient for you to make a choice. She turned to Eleanor. What happens if Martin finds out about the affair? About the pregnancy? Eleanor sighed heavily. Martin is old-fashioned and extremely protective of Diana. If he discovers Garrett has been involved with his daughter while married to you, he'll see it as the ultimate betrayal of trust. He'd almost certainly force Garrett out of the firm, perhaps even try to blacklist him with other developers in the city. So Garrett would lose everything, Olivia concluded. Most likely, Eleanor confirmed. Olivia looked at her husband, this man she'd loved, trusted, built a life with. This stranger who had been weighing her value against his ambitions and finding her wanting. I want a divorce, she said clearly. And I want you out of this house by tomorrow, Garrett paled. Liv, please. We can talk about this. Maybe we can what? She interrupted. Work it out? Stay together until your promotion is secure? Pretend this never happened while you become a father to another woman's child? She shook her head. There's nothing left to talk about. What about Martin? Garrett asked, his voice small. Are you going to tell him? And there it was, his true concern laid bare. Not the end of their marriage, not her pain, but the potential damage to his career. That, Olivia said coldly, depends entirely on what happens next. 1 year later, Olivia adjusted the framed architecture license on her new office wall, making sure it hung perfectly straight. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston's skyline stretched before her, a view she'd never tired of in the 3 months since Hayes and Reed Design had moved into their new downtown offices. A knock at her door made her turn. Martin Hayes stood in the doorway, his silver hair and distinguished presence commanding as ever, though he'd technically semi-retired 6 months ago. The Anderson portfolio just came in, he said, placing a folder on her desk. They've accepted our proposal for the waterfront development. Full budget, creative control, everything we asked for. Olivia smiled, a genuine expression that had become easier with time. That's fantastic news. Have you told Lauren's team? They'll need to start on the environmental impact studies right away. Already done, Martin assured her. Lauren's ecstatic. Says this is exactly the kind of project she came to us for. He paused, looking around her office with obvious approval. You've done remarkable things with the firm in a very short time, Olivia. Bringing in the sustainability division was inspired. It was the right direction for us, Olivia replied, thinking of how dramatically her life had changed since that fateful day when she'd been packing to leave Garrett. Clients want buildings that will stand the test of time in more ways than one. Martin nodded thoughtfully. I admit, when you first approached me about buying out Garrett's share of the firm, I was skeptical. Not about your abilities, I'd seen your marketing work for years, but about your experience in architecture. You took a chance on me, Olivia acknowledged. I'll always be grateful for that. What she didn't say was how surprised she'd been by her own decision that day. After Eleanor had left and Garrett had begun desperately packing his things, something unexpected had crystallized in Olivia's mind. She'd spent 7 years supporting Garrett's career, learning the business through osmosis, meeting his clients, reviewing his proposals, offering marketing insights that had helped him secure major projects. Instead of running away, she'd decided to claim what she'd helped build. The next morning, she'd made an appointment with Martin Hayes. She'd told him everything, the affair, Diana's pregnancy, Garrett's deception. Then, while Martin was still processing the betrayal by his protégé, she'd made her proposal. She would keep the scandal quiet if Martin would allow her to buy Garrett's partnership share at a fair market price. She had her inheritance from her grandmother, money she'd been saving for the children she and Garrett had planned to have. It wasn't enough for the full value of his share, but it was a substantial down payment. Martin, impressed by her composure and strategic thinking in the midst of personal crisis, had counteroffered. He would help finance her purchase of Garrett's share if she agreed to complete architectural coursework and licensing requirements. He'd seen her eye for design in the projects she'd influenced over the years. More importantly, he'd recognized in her the business acumen and integrity he'd mistakenly attributed to Garrett. "How is Diana doing?" Olivia asked carefully. Their relationship had been understandably tense at first, but over time, a fragile respect had formed between them. Martin's expression softened. "She and little James are doing well. She's talking about coming back part-time next quarter, maybe consulting on the residential projects." He hesitated. "She asks about you, you know. Wonders if you'll ever be able to forgive her." Olivia sighed, looking out at the city. "I've let go of the anger. That's not the same as forgiveness, but it's something." She turned back to Martin. "Tell her I'm glad she's coming back. The firm needs her talent." What had surprised Olivia most over the past year wasn't her professional transformation, but her emotional one. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved into something more complex, a kind of wisdom that informed both her personal and professional decisions. "Have you heard from him?" Martin asked, the question he rarely voiced. Garrett had moved to Chicago after the divorce was finalized, taking a position with a smaller firm there. The last Olivia had heard, he was trying to rebuild his career and maintain a long-distance relationship with his son. Diana had chosen to stay in Boston, close to her family and the support system she needed as a new mother. "Not recently," Olivia replied. "The divorce lawyers handle any remaining details." Martin nodded, clearly relieved. He'd never forgiven Garrett for the betrayal, though he'd remained civil for his grandson's sake. "Well, I should let you get back to it," he said, moving toward the door. "The executive committee meets at 3 to discuss the Anderson contract." "I assume you'll chair?" "Of course," Olivia confirmed. "I've already asked Elena to prepare the presentation." After Martin left, Olivia returned to the window, watching the city below. A text message chimed on her phone. Ryan, the landscape architect she'd been dating for the past 2 months. "Still on for dinner tonight?" "Found a new place with an amazing view." Olivia smiled as she typed her reply. "Looking forward to it." "I have good news to share." She slipped the phone into her pocket and returned to her desk, where the Anderson portfolio waited. A year ago, she'd been packing a suitcase, believing her life was ending. Instead, it had been beginning. The overheard conversation that wasn't meant for her ears had changed everything, not because it had revealed her husband's betrayal, but because it had revealed her own strength. In trying to leave Garrett, she'd found herself. In losing what she thought was her future, she'd created one far beyond what she'd ever imagined. Olivia opened the portfolio and began to read, ready to build something new, something that this time was entirely her own.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.